Hello, I'm Miles Ockwell. I'm a Chief Inspector with Sussex Police and I'm currently the District Commander for Worthing, Ada and Horsham in West Sussex. I'm going to speak to you for a few minutes about why I believe that it is necessary to engage men on the subject of gender equality and explain why I think that addressing gender inequality is fundamental to our role as police officers and staff. Before I joined the police, I was regularly asked why I wanted to choose this particular career. Because I wanted to be a police officer from a young age, I became well versed in my reasoning. I would talk about wanting to ensure that people could live their lives in freedom. And I had a strong sense that there was nothing which restricted one's freedom as much as being a victim of violence or abuse. I wanted to join the police because I wanted people to be free. And I wanted to ensure that those who restricted others' freedoms were brought to justice. When I developed these views as a young man, I saw them in the context of public place violence. I was raised in the same South London street that Stephen Lawrence was stabbed to death on in a racially motivated attack. When he was stabbed, he was waiting for the 161 bus, the same bus that I caught to school. This event and others contributed to me feeling quite vulnerable on the street as a teenage boy. But despite my fear of public place violence, as I grew older and learning from other people's experiences, it became obvious to me that the fear and vulnerability that I felt as a teenager and the restriction that public place violent crime can have on people's lives, while significant, is nothing in comparison to the suffering of those who are subjected to domestic abuse, predominantly in their own homes. I was able to seek refuge from the street in my safe and loving family home. This is something that those subjected to domestic abuse cannot do. Their lives are consumed by the abuse that they suffer, and we cannot ignore that the vast majority of domestic and sexual abuse is perpetrated by men on women. On a personal level, I find gender inequality quite difficult to comprehend. I'm one of 6 children and was raised in a family of 3 girls and 3 boys. I'm also a triplet. At the time of our birth, therefore, as we lay together in the same crib, my 2 triplet sisters and I could not have been more equal as members of the human race. We had the same parents, the same birthday. As we grew, we lived our lives in the same houses and went to the same schools. But as we have grown up, I have realised that we were not equal at all. Despite being brought up together in one of the most economically developed countries in the world, my sisters, from the minute that they were born, and simply because they happened to be of a different gender, had less chance of earning as much money than I, even if we had the same qualifications. They had less chance of reaching the top of their chosen profession, and most significantly, they were about 8 times more likely to be raped than I was. One of my sisters suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder as a result of an incident where, aged 13, she witnessed her friend's mother be beaten close to death by her stepfather. While beating her, he threatened to go upstairs and rape both of the girls. She hid under a bed for hours until he fell asleep in a drunken stupor, and they all escaped out of a window across fields in the dark to seek refuge. The psychological impact of this event has completely affected her life. It affects her mental and physical health, which in turn affects her relationships and ability to enjoy life. That man was supposed to be looking after my sister, but instead he used his power to abuse his wife, and he used the threat of sexual violence against 2 children to control and terrify them. I tell this story to emphasise the point that we are not born equal. That women, just because of their gender, are significantly more likely to face disadvantage and abuse than men, and that we, men and women, as human beings, cannot and should not accept a world in which this inequality exists. Gender inequality empowers men, and hundreds and thousands of them abuse that power to abuse women and girls in the UK every year. The recent revelations which led to the Me Too movement underlines this. Yes, victims of this high-profile abuse are men and women, but the common factor in each case is that the perpetrator is in a position of power and they are, as far as I can see, all men. And it is the revelations that led to the Me Too movement which highlight why it is so important to address gender inequality in the workplace. The commitments that Surrey and Sussex Police have made in collaboration with the United Nations through the HeForShe movement focus on addressing workplace inequality and make a link between that and our role as a police service to combat domestic and sexual abuse in the communities we serve. As a police service, keeping our communities safe is fundamental to our organisation's purpose. But I argue that our ability to protect people from abuse is undermined where gender inequality exists. This is not a women's issue, this is a policing issue. I cannot accept a world where my sisters are more at risk of harm than I, simply because they are women. I cannot accept that my 5-year-old daughter may not be as successful as her brother in whatever she chooses to do, just because she is a girl. And I challenge any son, brother, husband or father out there to justify why they would accept a world in which the women in their lives are disadvantaged. At an organisational level, there is a well-established link between diverse teams and better performing organisations. Gender equality is good for business, and in our line of work, that means we reduce suffering and harm. As employees within our organisations, surely we want to work in an environment which is fair and just, and this must make going to work a happier experience for everyone. And speaking of happiness, gender equality is so much better for men's physical and mental health too. The gender stereotypes which are reinforced within organisations that are traditionally dominated by men are what makes it difficult for us to speak about our feelings. It's what makes it difficult for us to talk about how a traumatic experience has affected us at work. It's what prevents us from seeking a healthy work-life balance and spending quality time with our families. It's the negative effects of all of this which contributes to the fact that men are more than 3.5 times more likely to commit suicide than women. So through our collaboration with the UN, I stand before you as a police officer to ask you to embrace the opportunity and to join me to help the police service in the United Kingdom to be world leaders in addressing gender inequality in the law enforcement sector. I ask you to do this in the hope that you will recognise that it gets to the heart of why we joined the police, because we all genuinely want to make the world a safer place for everyone to live in. If you are watching this and you are a man in a senior position in your police force, I would ask you to have the courage to accept the uncomfortable truth that in reaching your position, you may have been the beneficiary of the gender inequality that exists within policing. I ask anyone watching this to recognise that the gender inequality within our organisations affect our ability to protect women and girls in our communities from abuse. And because this is fundamentally unjust, I ask you to grasp this opportunity and to make the commitment through HeForShe to take the positive action required to tackle it.